you'll think your body's doing that thing, and your body will naturally create those chemicals and things in your body. So what am I saying? I'm saying that the story is more important than the actual thing that you're dealing with. You believing in it, your body. When we get into a deep level of metaphysics, what are we really unpacking here? The idea that your body can do whatever it believes is real. If I can tell you a good enough story and you believe it, your body will work. And all I have to do is
Okay. We are going to start off with experiences and somewhat extending what we discussed last time. So, per usual, I'll tee up some ideas and then let you take it away for a little bit. I've been reading William James lately, and William James is one of the fathers of psychology. He's an American philosopher and published a lot of work towards the end of the 19th century. And he's one of the founders also of the philosophical school of pragmatism, and another separate school of thought, radical empiricism. And so James thought that experience was the primary reality. And that's something that I've been toying with over the past few weeks, because I think most people think of reality as something self-evident, but they don't define it. Some people think of reality as the physical world, or some people think of reality as that which we can sense. But this idea that experience is reality it has many implications for psychology, for philosophy, for religion. It's just amazing. But in the last video, I gave an example of what I conceptualized as a shooting star. I had this experience where I saw this light fall from the sky at 3:30 a.m. in the morning, and the experience was profound. It was something that I really haven't experienced before. At least I don't remember. And today I kind of want to talk about other experiences that are like that seem to escape our knowledge structures initially. And so I want to talk about dreams. I want to talk about psychotic states and the concomitant hallucinations and delusions, really the auditory and visual hallucinations that are sometimes associated with psychotic states, near death experiences. You were telling me about how you categorize all of those as seemingly the same thing, or from the same realm, or the same kind of experience. Can you unpack that for me?
yeah. So basically, first of all, when I first started doing shrooms, I was pretty sure I was going crazy. And then I slowed down a little bit and I started researching a bit, reading some triple logs, getting some understanding. And what you begin to realize is that what I call it is the fork or the quantum. Some people call it ether or what is it called? The latent potential or it's another word for it. I can't. The liminal space is the word that I was thinking about. And so what you really end up realizing is, what are we referencing here? We're referencing the idea that what does potential look like in this reality? And so when we talk about the dreams or we talk about near death experiences, there's two sides to it. A lot of what I see in the psychosis and psychedelic space is dealing with the ether or the potentiality of a space. And then what you see with the near death experiences and things on the other side is more unpacking the experience of going in and out of the body at a high level. So what am I saying? I believe that there's a buffer layer between here and what we would call heaven. And that is what the dream near death experience realm is. It's the exiting of the body, or technically, more accurately, it's traveling the inside of what you are as a spirit, in a sense. And so, a lot of times, what we're talking about is this idea of either traveling the darkness, which is the inside of your body or the inner self, or you're traveling what we would call like the fourth dimension or purgatory or this area where ghosts, demons, and all of these things exist between here and whatever is higher than that. So heaven, hell, purgatory, whichever one you want to call it. But this is the space or the loading screen for reality is what I like to call it. And when you look at it like that, there's a lot of potential for how all these things connect. And you begin to, once you look at the research, be able to tie together the similarities of these spaces and how you interact in them and experience them.
So I definitely like the conceptualization of many of those experiences as latent potential, or ether as well. I like both of those, but I'm going to pick up on latent potential. There's this notion that many of our ancient ancestors thought of the world as a disk of known territory, and then there's a border that then transitions into a watery unknown. And then in Genesis, if I remember correctly, what God creates the earth out of is something like watery latent potential. I think the word is tohu vaBohu. I can't remember if that's associated with the serpent or not, but I think it's associated with water. And this metaphor of water being not exactly completely formless, but in a sense, it is formless because it's flexible, it's adaptable. If you go into it, it forms around you, but at the same time, it can consume you and drown you. And so the idea that dreams, let's say, to just pick one, provide you with some sort of access to this latent potential that was previously unknown, I think is very cool. And then one other thing I'm going to add on to it from a psychological standpoint. There's this phenomenon called latent inhibition, which is essentially learned irrelevance. For most people, if you have an average commute, if you have a usual pathway to work that you drive, you learn to ignore most of the information around you. And so people vary in their ability to unconsciously ignore most things. So you have people who have high latent inhibition, and you have people who have low latent inhibition. And the people with low latent inhibition, they are things keep popping up to them as relevant, where other people with high latent inhibition just ignore it and then they ignore it for a long time. And low latent inhibition has been associated with creativity and also psychosis, which is really which is really cool. And so part of the way I understand that is it'd be interesting to see if people with low latent inhibition also dream more or have more vivid dreams. That'd be pretty cool to make that connection. But basically, as we mature in the world and gain knowledge, we tend to constrain our perceptions, and we tend to become very efficient, right? Because rather than paying attention to all the small details of my commute, I just keep going along the road, and as long as nothing really knocks me off my course, I'm fine. I kind of go into autopilot. But that means that we, in some sense, block out a lot of reality that is potentially there. And so I think that's super interesting.
I got a small tangent. I'm gonna try to keep it as short as possible, but I want to walk through a couple of things you just said. So first, when we talk about the creation of the world, or when we talk about in Genesis, a lot of times we talk about water. A lot of times, this black or dark water or the void is considered the primordial womb. This is where the mother comes into play because this is the space at which the reality is born into. It's her womb. That's why when ladies, they call it breaking the water broke, and because it's the releasing of the water from the womb. And so imagine that the world we live in is a primordial womb, and this dark water is the water of that womb. Now, mind you, the womb is closed, and it's closed, so it's dark, and it's dark water, and it's endless, and it's growth. So this is the law of correspondence explaining this situation at our level. And so what we're looking at here is this idea that this water or this fluid that we're bathed in or born into also feeds us and gives us the nourishment that we need. You drink of the water of mother as a child in order to grow into yourself. This is the concept here. And so the idea here is that once you're born into the world, the placenta comes out with you, right? Some people would argue that cutting off the placenta separates the child from the mother too early and that you have to let the placenta sit till it dries out and all the fluid inside enters the body. And so we could argue if this latent understanding or this latent attention span that you were mentioning earlier, I forgot the terminology, is tied to one's connection to mother in the environment. So in the physical, once you're outside of the womb, how good of a receiver are you for this information, this latent potential? And so these are the people that are more creative because they're more connected to their childhood self or the version of themselves that were in the womb. So when we talk about metaphysical work, the idea here of inner child work is about connecting with the version of yourself that's closest to your mother, that is the most pure, and that is the best receiver from this information. So, like another point that you said is that we're conditioned into this kind of thinking. We're taught through knowledge and ego. So, the more strong your ego is, the less you feel like you need to be curious about the world. So, the more that you think you know everything, the less you're able to know more and the less you're able to grow and be childlike and accept the experiences you need to create the entropy in your life. And so this is all correlated to the same thing. And so basically what we're asking here is what's the connection to spirit that, and how does that correlate to creativity, to dreams, to visualization, and your ability to step outside of your perceptions? Like you said, if you walk down the street and you feel like you know everything that's on the street, you're not really looking or curious. But if you walk around the world and everything has a potential to have changed since the last time you've seen it or to grow, which it does and it always is, there's just an endless amount of potential in
Man, okay, you said a lot there. A lot of
it.
good things. So there's a psychoanalytic idea of regression, and there's two ways to understand it. There's the Freudian way and the Jungian way. I'm going to focus on the Jungian way. So Jung believed that everybody had an ideal, and he considered that ideal the self, which he also associated with wholeness, the wholeness of your personality, the totality of your personality. And he believed that it was there when you were born in potential form, particularly because when you're born, you're also connected to the collective unconscious as well. And so yourself is there, but it requires a particular ordering function that goes along with it as you are developing in the world and as you're integrating with the new environment that you're going to be encountering. And so the process of moving towards the self he called individuation. And individuation is a cycle of regressions and progressions. A progression is an adaptation to the external world, and a regression is an adaptation to the internal world. But a regression is often characterized as a return to mother, which is very interesting. A return to what? The primordial waters in some sense, to become rejuvenated, and
To be a child
various
of Mary.
mechanisms. Exactly. In various mechanisms of a regression are dreams, creative fantasies. He had this idea that there was psychic libido, there was energy in the unconscious, and when you were dealing with encounters in the external world of consciousness, that sometimes you needed to regress back to the collective unconscious, the spirit of your ancestors, to retrieve more energy, to retrieve wisdom. And oftentimes the forms of those wisdom of that wisdom came in the form of dreams. And so in psychotherapy, one of the things that Jung would do with his clients is just work through those dreams to figure out what they were saying to you. Were they predicting something that maybe was going to happen in the future, or were they pointing you towards something in your past that's unresolved, or are they highlighting an aspect of your current personality that's too lopsided and pointing you towards balance? And so that's dream interpretation is a whole another thing we could get into, but that's I think that's a interesting. I think the Jungian framework does a good job of linking the metaphors we were just discussing, while also still aligning with this idea that your experience is reality. And so your dreams are they're real from the stance of William James.
Yeah. So what I like to say is understanding that your body is a receiver. And so your dreams, your visualizations and things are a reaction of a reaction and a mixture of what your body's receiving externally and internally, and its ability and its attempt to try to communicate that to you in something that you will understand. So a lot of times your dreams and visualizations, like for me with psychedelics, like I'll get into this a little bit, and it's something that I don't really talk about a lot. I say that every time I mention psychedelics because I had a time, brother. Like, I had a time. Like there was phases of me like visualizing talking to aliens, dragons, all type of shit. But this is like deep meditation. So what was I able to gather from my experiences with psychedelics? One, that the psychedelics weren't what created the vision. The psychedelics pushed my mind into a state where it had to relax in order for me to survive. It forced me into a deep meditative theta state. That's what psychedelics do. Psychedelics have your mind moving so fast that the only thing that it can do is shut off. And as long as you don't freak out when it does that, you get a nice little ride. It gives you a nice little reactive picture. Now, let's take it to the other side. If you meditate long enough and you allow your body and your nervous system to actually relax, the same system will click on. That's what I've learned, my experience. Takes different amount of time for everybody, takes different kind of breathing for everybody. But the body is set to once it relaxes at a certain point, it will show you a movie. I'm convinced that your DNA is set to automatically mm, start giving you certain messages when the body is relaxed with certain experiences. So it's a combination of experiences and stillness. So this is the whole Wu Wei thing. This is the whole Buddhist Taoist thing played out. Why do I need to stop moving? Because I need to integrate my experiences enough for my body to understand what part of the story I'm in. So, what am I saying here? I'm saying that I believe that psychedelic experiences, dreams, and meditation all put the body in a state of calm. Like we say, this theta state that a lot of people talk about for astral travel, this theta gamma state of brainwaves, puts you at a frequency for receiving information via your DNA, aliens, whatever you want to call it. But there is a system that cuts on when you're at a certain frequency that relays information, and it comes through for everybody differently based off of your genetics, whether it's visions, whether it's music, whether it's smells. When you relax your body at a certain point and in a certain frequency for a certain amount of time, you pick up information. This is the same thing with a near death experience. Your body's cut off in a way to where it's picking up on a frequency that you would normally be out of tune for because of, like you said, you being conditioned to not hear it. So what the spiritual community says is that you're in such a state of anxiety consistently because of the phone flashing in your face, because of you not breathing regularly, because of you eating a horrible diet. There's so many things at play that you're naturally out of this state. And arguably that it's a natural state for humans to be this calm. We just miss it because of our social engineering.
So there's a interesting juxtaposition of chaos and order here that I wonder if we'll be able to traverse, because you mentioned the perhaps psychological calmness that can be associated with psychedelic experiences and meditation. And from a neurological standpoint, psychedelics have been associated with an increase in entropy and entropy in the brain. And so we're talking at two different levels. So maybe that's how we'll be able to mesh them together. Let me finish one thing. Okay, the the mechanism of action for certain psychedelic drugs like LSD and psilocybin, if I remember correctly, from reading people like Robin Carr Harris, there's an increase in serotonergic activity in the cortical columns in your brain. A cortical column is a cluster of neurons that essentially represents a category. And so this ties back to how what we were discussing earlier. Cortical columns, imagine that they represent categories, and you have many of them throughout your cortex, and they have a lot more activity within them than they do between them. And so you can imagine that that is associated with the distinctions that we clearly perceive in the world, right? It's because the categories, these cortical columns, are not exactly talking to each other. They're all the communication is intra the cortical column. But what the increase in serotonin does on these specific receptors for these cortical columns is increase their communication between each other. And so it's as if the categories dissolve. It's as if the categorical boundaries dissolve. And you could, I wonder to what degree that's associated with the lack of latent inhibition, or at least the lower latent inhibition, and the casting away of the very rigid, orderly conceptions and knowledge that we use to overlay on the world, where things become what? New again?
It's almost like the increase in entropy pushes you out. Like, look at it this way. Like, I'm gonna tell you the way that it rationalized for me and what the experience felt like for me, and then maybe we could talk through the psychological actuality of it. But for me, it was almost as if my brain was so active that I could realize that it wasn't me that was driving. And that realization that my brain operated outside of me allowed for me to sit in a position and observe my thinking in a way that changed the way I looked at the world from there on. You see what I'm saying? It's like it established where the ego was for me in an experiential way. Like I had experienced what my ego was. I could experience the separation between all the ideas and categories that are in my head and me watching it like this don't even make no sense no more. You know what I'm saying? Like, so imagine like you sitting outside of yourself, like you're watching how you think, how you feel. So it's this idea of when your mind is in certain states, it almost allows you, I call it dropping into the seat of the soul. So when we look at the tree of life, it's called Tiferet. This is called, or the Duat, or Dot, D-A-A-T, D-A apostrophe T. This is the hidden knowledge space. So imagine that there's like a waiting room inside of your body for your soul, the space where your soul sits while all of this is going on, the observer seat as a sort, you know? And so for me, what I'm thinking is that what we understand as dreams and all these different things are just us sitting in the observer seat and watching the mind process this information that we're experiencing. And there's an aspect of what we call integration in the psychedelic space, where it's like once you see these things, you almost have to sit in that perception long enough to integrate them into a form of understanding. And so some people would tell you if you do psychedelics and you just go out with that information, you don't integrate it, that you're gonna miss it because you almost got it too fast to know what it was. You almost had to sit with it for a little while to really understand it. And so that's one thing that I've noticed too. And so what happened to me when I got into metaphysics and everything and really trying to study what we consider like astral travel and lucid dreaming and all of this, all I realized was that, oh, I'm already doing this. It's just whether or not I'm paying attention to it or not that makes the difference. And then psychedelics and meditation and yoga are just tools for focusing on these subtle things, if that makes sense.
No, no, I think it makes sense. It sounds like a vast opening up, and it's interesting how you frame it as what did you say? Your ego watching your brain and your mind work. And is it also would you also say that what was fluttering through my mind was the connection between us as finite beings and the infinite, whatever the infinite is, the ultimate reality, however you want to frame it, and how these experiences that we are discussing may be a means of opening up that channel between us and infinity. But it's almost as if it can be guided in some sense. What's up?
Okay, so let's go back to the point from the beginning. If you're connected to mother and mother is this source and you're receiving information from this source, imagine that you, so the way it was brought to me is we have what they have what you call heart brain map. This idea that the heart has brain neurons in it, and technically the heart receives the information before the brain does. This is why you can feel it before you think it, right? So this is the idea of getting closer to this source of information, right? So the way I kind of visualize it and explain it is when you're sitting in the seat of the soul, you're like sitting at the bridge between the physical and the spiritual, if that makes sense. And so you're not getting the information that you've thought about it. You're just getting the feeling, the intuition, the inkling of it, the what we would call in metaphysics, you would be getting like the forethought, not the afterthought. You know what I'm saying? Like if you got the information beforehand, if you could pick up what was going to happen before, and this is why we like people that can predict the future, is that they are able to pick up on these subtle signals. the signals that come from the source. Like you said, through this little hole. The faith of a mustard seed, all these things, a thread in the needle. There's this idea of you having to be small enough to fit through the hole to spirit, if that makes sense. And so when we talk about like the seat of the soul or the Tiferet or the pineal gland, there's this idea of pulling information directly from source. So what I try to explain and how I explain it when I get into people that really are into the spiritual thing is realizing like, why would I give people, why would I pull from myself when I could pull from the source? Why would I deplete my physical body when I could pull everything from the source of everything, not strain myself and have the most honest answer? How do I train myself to do that, though, was the question.
And it's there's also so Carl Jung talks about essentially how there's order, chaos, and the hero. How about that? And these three characters, these archetypes, are always present. And the chaotic feminine, essentially, could be thought of as
Raw
what?
information.
I think so. Raw information, raw experience, and somehow associated with potential. See, that's now I'm thinking about what's the relationship between potential and experience. It's because when you experience something, when you really experience something, it escapes your knowledge structures. You don't have the words for it. Maybe it manifests in when you truly experience something, and maybe we can talk about music now, because I think music is a good example. But when you really experience something, or when you really have an experience, it initially escapes your knowledge structures, your procedural knowledge structures, your narrative or imagistic knowledge structures, as well as your semantic knowledge structures. And then as you're wrestling with that experience, you are, in a sense, converting it into something that is useful for you. And then when you validate that the knowledge that you've transmuted the experience into is actually useful, it's only then that you go back and look at that experience, which is now a memory that you have, and you say, oh, well, yeah, that dream meant that I was supposed to go have an argument with my wife or something because I was becoming resentful, right? Just something like that. But it's not like you had that knowledge at the first place, kind of like you mentioned with the psychedelic experiences, where you have the experience, but then it slowly becomes a memory, and you have to turn it into, you have to integrate it into something that is useful for you. And so
That was the word there, integration.
yeah, it right. And I think we mentioned how, okay, so I mentioned chaos, hero, order. You can also think of that as the mother, the son, and the father. You could imagine that masculinity, the father, is the ordering spirit that comes from heaven, right? The spirit that constrains everything. And another way to think of that is just as a conceptualization, as an abstraction. You know, there's a physical cup or whatever, there's a can, and then there's the concept of a can. And I know that this is a can because I have the concept of a can, and that's what enables me to bring multiple cans under the unified category of a can. And then there's earth, there's mother, there's multiplicity, there's plurality, there's differentiation. And the sun is what mediates between those two things. It's the hero that mediates between those two things. And then if you overlay that on a temporal frame, you could say that, well, there's the wisdom of the past. I don't know if this works, but maybe there's the wisdom of the past, and then there's the horizon of potential that's the future. And again, you as the hero are supposed to mediate between those two things, because you can't only live in the future, because then you're making everything up from scratch, and you can't only rely on the wisdom of the past, because you have new problems that weren't exactly around when your ancestors were around. I'm going to pause there.
So it's like basically what we're going through at this point is trying to figure out, okay, This is the chicken and egg conversation for experience. Does the experience come first, or does the explanation of the experience come first? Technically, the experience come first. Then, once you have the experience, you have to find the information or the means for communicating that experience. Once you find the means for communicating that experience, you've integrated that experience, and that knowledge becomes wisdom. You see what I'm saying? So sometimes you get the knowledge first. Sometimes you have the information before you get the experience. And sometimes you have the experience, and the experience makes you go seek the knowledge. But you need experience and knowledge to create wisdom. So what are we talking about here? Let's look at this from the Kabbalic sense. The son, or the source, the father, and the mother. So technically the son is considered a crown. A lot of times we forget this. The fool is where this all starts. The fool and the son are two things on the same coin, because they both provide the energy. That's the same thing. So the fool, or the son, then leads to the father. The father directs the son's energy to the mother, and that energy directed through the father creates or births the world, because the mother is the womb. You see what I'm saying? Or you could argue that the mother is the womb that started it all. This is and then you start realizing how the tree of life repeats itself. Why are there three worlds in the tree of life? Because in one world it's the son, the father, the mother. In another world it's the mother, the child, or the child that becomes the father. It's a whole conversation. We think about Sophia. So the idea that Sophia is the 13th archon. She's separated from Source. She had a son. She then married that son and made him king. And then that son birthed the world. You see what I'm saying? So this is the corrupted cycle. This is the cycle that we were born from. This is the corrupted cycle. This is the half creation. This is what we know as the demiurge. Now, let's pay attention now. Sophia is considered wisdom. You see what I'm saying? She's the 13th icon, wisdom. That's why we have Friday the 13th. All of this is related around the dark mother, or Sophia, or Lilith, or wisdom in the Bible, or when we talk about those canonical texts. So what are we talking about here? We're saying that this cycle is it's just a loop. It's whether you talk about mother, father, child, experience, knowledge, wisdom. We're just talking about trinities. These are the cycles that information is developed and recycled through. So let's zoom out a little bit. If you look at the human experience, technically we can't explain it because it's not finished. You see what I'm saying? The journey's not done. This is the idea of valuing the journey or the ending. A lot of times we want the wisdom before we finish the journey. You won't understand the purpose of your life till it's over with. So to try to figure it out in entirety beforehand is a fruitless journey, because you never know where you're going to end. So if you create an ego based off of where you are now and it doesn't grow anymore, you're now rejecting the potential of what you could be.
Right. And okay, so there's two ways we can go here. We can.
Yeah, I said a lot there, so I'm gonna let you just kind of.
No, you're good. In my mind, I wanted to try to start to bring some of what we were discussing into the current culture, and I'm also trying to think of some specific examples. But I still also want to talk about music at some point, and so maybe put music aside for a second, and we'll see if it comes back up, if that's cool with you. Okay, so there are ways that you can disrupt this cycle of experience, knowledge, wisdom at a psychological and a cultural level. And here's an example that I thought of. Imagine you're a parent raising your child, right? 5-year-old boy. And normal day, and your son comes to you and says, I saw a monster. Okay, so they had an experience, and their knowledge structure manifested that experience to them as, I saw a monster, right? And then you're like, oh, okay, what's going on? And so you go outside, you explore, and you see that your neighbor's German Shepherd got loose, right? And your son is like, extremely terrified. And when I say that your son used the knowledge structure, of a monster, I'm not reducing that to language. I'm saying that your son likely reacted in their nervous system as if that is a threatening beast that can kill me, right? And so what's your job as a parent? Your job is to help tune that knowledge structure such that they can be better prepared to handle similar experiences moving forward. And so, first, you don't deny their experience, right? We from the perspective of William James, experience just is, right? The truth or the falsity comes when you're evaluating the knowledge structure. And so you say, all right, my son said that he saw a monster. Well, part of what you could do is you could say, well, yes, that dog could be a monster if you treat him improperly, if you approach him the wrong way, and then maybe you take your son and you interact with the dog in the right way, and you show him that yes, the dog could be a threat, but the dog could also be someone playful. It could also be a friend if you act appropriately. And so now you're saying, yes, the dog is potentially a monster, but the dog is also potentially a friend, and it depends on how you act. And so you're using these words as you're showing them, and then maybe you can allow your son to imitate you. And then now that, assuming it's a good dog, right? And and then
That's
things
what
are
I'm saying, you gotta.
fine, and this, your son is watching you the whole time. And so what you're trying to do is to give them wisdom, right? Like they had that experience, and then you want to help them integrate that experience into these differentiated knowledge structures that they can then, over iterated experiences in the future, hopefully become more adaptive. And
Yeah,
you could make that go wrong by ignoring their experience, by telling, oh, monsters aren't real, by essentially not attending to them and encouraging them to extract out good information from this experience that's aligned with what you hope for them in the future.
yeah, and I think what you're saying is very important because what you're doing is you're explaining why the church said, "Give me your child from 1 to 7, and I can raise, and I can give you a man." Why? Because in order for me to properly navigate the world, I need a good compass. And a good compass is how I decipher things. Like, for instance, with the dog thing, I was taught real early on, not just, oh, dogs are good or bad, but learn how to look at how an animal interacts with you. It's an important thing, but everybody isn't taught that. It's the tail wagging, it's the tail tucked between their legs. What those different body languages mean. You know what I'm saying? Understanding how to interact with a dog. Is it growling? Is it drooling? Does it seem rabid? You know what I'm saying? Like, how do we discern those different things? And I think one thing that we do with children mostly that is hard is we try to mitigate the amount of variety that we give them for understanding to keep it simpler. But sometimes we don't allow them. We end up sitting. I've met a lot of adults whose understanding about things is like this big. And it's like, I kind of feel bad for you because you just don't have the tools to properly figure out what you should be doing. And it's not nobody's fault, but it's just how they were raised. And then I ask myself, okay, well, that's so a lot of times we hear people say, well, you ever meet somebody like, oh, they was raised right. That just means they were taught similar nuances that you were. You see what I'm saying? And so a lot of times we ask ourselves, so what is I'm always been curious of how does the human mind work if it wasn't interfered with? Like how long would it take for us to figure it out? And then we kind of know the answer to that because how long did it take us to get civilized? Like it didn't. I tell people a lot of time we're built on the shoulder of our ancestors. Like we have years of us figuring out what some is and ain't and what we should and shouldn't do. We only survive as long as we do it because of years of people dying doing dumb shit. Like we have to acknowledge that. Like that's what epigenetics is to me. Like we have generations of DNA in our body that tells us how to interpret information. And our ability, this goes back to the point earlier, our ability to tap into that is another thing. And yeah, hell, even to tie the music thing into that, understanding that we're all dancing on this what they call the monochord, and that understanding which tune you're playing or what experiences you need to properly play in that song is a whole nother conversation. But I think that what I'm really just trying to say is that a lot of times mm, like you said, sometimes you're hindering a person by trying to define their experiences for them, and sometimes you're helping them. And our ability to discern when we're hindering and when we're helping someone is a skill.
And there's a yeah, no, absolutely. And I can imagine that one difficulty that comes with parenting, but also in teaching in general, is balancing between experience and, let's say, conceptual knowledge. You know, many of our institutions are focused on force feeding you conceptual knowledge. And there's a lot of great things about conceptual knowledge. It can prime you to already kind of preform an experience as it's happening. You have certain expectations that enable you to be biased to act and perceive in a certain way that if it's aligned, if the experience and the knowledge are both true, yeah, sure, both true, well, then that's good, right? You don't necessarily have to flail about and deal with the chaotic experience and figure out how to frame it. It's like, no, you have the linguistic concepts and you, to some degree, know what those things mean. And then you have better tools for handling an experience. But there has to be a balance there. You know, you can't spend 5 years reading books and then expect to be able to be a great engineer or clinician when it comes time to deal with the real experience. But there's also the other side of that I've encountered with teachers where all they have is experience and they can't articulate their experience. And so they just kind of also are flailing about when they're teaching and they're saying, well, you know, schizophrenia, you know, it kind of feels like and I'm just like, no, it's not exactly helpful to me. And maybe that's just my idiosyncrasy, but yeah, you need a balance of embodied experience and conceptual knowledge to be effective, I think. But I have a maybe tangential question for you when it comes to music and dancing and your experience of music and dancing. Because I have this, okay, let me lay out something. Like, I have this theory that music reflects raw experience. And so, what do I mean by that? Music is layered. There's layers of music, right? And you could think of most genres, right? Um, I can't say that. I haven't listened to most genres. I'm thinking about rock music, rap, hip hop, right? There's layers to it. There's layers, there's multiple elements. The there's a harmony across the elements and the layers. And there's a balance between predictable patterns and novelty, right? If it's too predictable, it's just boring. Like, no one listens to it, no one likes it. If it's too chaotic, it's not music, it's noise. Um, and then the last thing I guess I would say is that there's a through line for music. I'm trying to imagine a song that I really enjoy with or without lyrics. It's like there's something that unifies it, so you know it's a song. You know it's that song, even though it's a collection of multiple elements and parts. So I like to think that experience is like that. I like to think that experience has many elements. It's layered, it's hierarchically organized. There's a harmony to it that you could get aligned with. You could dance with the experience, or you could be out of tune with the experience. And so I don't know, maybe it's just metaphorical, but I think there's something there.
Yeah, so really what I like to get into when we talk about stuff like that is realizing, okay, well, first, what's the monochord? The monochord is a theory. This goes back to what we was talking about earlier with the planets and how, okay, Venus makes the flower pattern around the planet, right? It also, I guess the word is oscillates or vibrates at a specific frequency. So let me put, what am I saying? All of the planets, everything is vibrating. It's made out of cells, right? So there's a tune that's playing there because vibration is sound. We know that. And so the tune is at a frequency that either A, we can't hear, or two, we only hear because we were born into it. What am I saying? If you put yourself in a sound vacuum, your body freaks out. Why? Because you're no longer connected to the monochord. You can't hear the all encompassing sound that your body has heard for its entire life. And that destabilizes the nervous system. Why? Because you're a part of a dance, you're a part of a song, and you not being in it and being disconnected from it breaks you out of that pattern. What am I saying? I believe that the reality, everything is like a track list. You know how, like you said, the music is stacked. You have different people playing different parts. They come in and out. Some sounds play the whole time. Some sounds only play for 1 second. Some sounds you only hear one time during the song. You see what I'm saying? And so what we're talking about here is that the reality in everything is frequency, it's vibration. And with that, we understand that all things are music, all things are layered. What does that mean? That imagine we all see the conductor and that some of us are just better at playing than others. You see what I'm saying? And those that play well are usually rewarded for playing their parts well. I'm a firm believer that part of playing the game is understanding the dance of life. And the dance of life is to the monochord. What does that mean? I'm saying that if you understand how to play the role of your life well enough, you'll begin to sing a song that brings the right kind of attention to you to succeed in life. That's a theory that I have.
Man. So in some sense, you're saying that to harmonize with reality is good.
Yes, that's balance.
And
Like you said, you can't make too much noise because it
develop
becomes noise. And remember, there's a mythology that humanity was destroyed because we were noisy. We were out of balance. We disturbed the world around us so much. Let me add another caveat or example of this. Some people argue that the reason why we don't shoot nuclear bombs anymore is because the first time we shoot nuclear bombs, aliens came and told us, cut this shit out. Why? Because nuclear bombs are big enough. We're talking about noise and the monochord and all this. The idea is that humanity was erased because we were making too much noise. The first flood was because humanity was too noisy. Or the first flood or we were destroyed by flames. One of those was because we were too fucking loud. And it's in a couple of different myths. It's in the Mayan myth and a couple other myths. And then you go back and you look at, okay, well, when we started shooting nuclear bombs off around here, aliens showed up. Why? Some people argue that the aliens came to tell us not to do that because nuclear bombs affect the atmosphere in a way that's entropic enough to infect the entire system, to disrupt this core. Why is this important? Because they say that the reason why Atlantis or Lemuria was destroyed was because that was the first time we stumbled upon nuclear energy and blew some shit up. Now, this is just mythology. This is fringe theory here. But there's a concept here where us being out of order and being destructive and at war with disturbing the peace of the reality and usually ending with us wiped the fuck out. So, I mean, hey, you argue what you want to, but I believe that there is a balance here that we have to maintain. And if you get out of balance, the system resets and it starts over again. And it keeps doing that until we figure out a way to maintain balance long enough. Long enough for who? I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. And, part of the way I've been conceptualizing how we have evolved is associated with all of these different mechanisms we have for tapping us back into place if we veer too far off the golden path. And so what are some of the things we've evolved? First of all, we have a body. Okay. we have a body that limits us and only enables us to do certain things, right? Like we can't fly, we can only breathe so long underwater. So there's a lot of constraints that orient us towards certain behaviors and away from other behaviors. We have emotional systems. We have a positive emotion system that pushes you to explore in the world. We have fear, rage, lust. And so these are all action systems that predispose you to perceive and behave in a certain way, given certain contextual cues. Um, and then we also have other people that are also communicating with us and telling us when we are, let's say, not listening to conscious, right? When we are at risk of breaching some order, even if it's a local order. And it's not as if any one of these things are 100% accurate in terms of keeping us aligned with reality in a harmonious way. I mean, people sacrifice themselves give up their body all the time if it's for a higher purpose. And then that kind of implies that there is implies a few things. One, we probably need all of those different adaptive mechanisms to be aligned, to help us to be aligned with reality. But two, there is something like a higher purpose, maybe, that is orienting all of those things, where our emotions are subordinate to this higher purpose. Our tension with our social reality is subordinate to the higher purpose. And I don't know. In my opinion, I think that's one of the ways we came up with the conception of God. But maybe that's a different subject.
Yeah, I mean, we're pretty much saying the same thing. Like, dude, I almost feel like God is just the best way of explaining all of this shit. Like, there's not really a better way of like explaining this omnipotent, all-knowing potentiality that's active but not active, that organizes but allows chaos. There's a lot to go into this faculty, right? So, like, how do we make sense of all of that? I don't know. For me, it's just realizing that, like, I tell people that you're a multidimensional being having a human experience. So there's a part of you that isn't human. And being okay with that and understanding that allows for you to experience this reality in a way to where you can learn from it and grow from point. Yeah, so like I do believe that experience is important. I do believe that our ability to understand experience and how it correlates to knowledge is important. And I also believe that we experience everything that we're experiencing so that God or source or the beginning of this projection or emanation can better know itself. So I think that experience is almost like I call it Dharma. Yeah, we talk about Dharma and karma. Like there's a system in place in our knowledge base for how in balance or out of balance we are with our mission. And it's almost like a credit system. Like, oh, if you do accrue too much karma, then you have to try again. It's the same thing for humanity. We accrue too much karma, we got to start the system over again. We get a whole lot of Dharma, then we might have a good life on the next end. And so, what's a good life and all of that? I try not to concern myself with that anymore. How do I best experience this reality? And how do I enjoy it for what it is without questioning the parts of it that are obviously not meant to figure out yet? There's some parts you can, but some of it is just a part of the show and you have to let it play out.
I agree. Do I have any concluding remarks? Seek out experience, man. Experience is great. I think it'd be good for us to be open to things like dreams, near-death experiences, and also psychedelic experiences. There are centers doing research on the benefits of psychedelic and mystical experiences. I mean, it's been going on for decades, but I think there was a there's a period where it stopped, and over the past few years, it's ramped back up in relation to helping people with trauma, depression, anxiety, and so um, one of the things I'm interested in possibly pursuing in the future is trying to build a model for who would best be suited for taking certain psychedelic substances, like of people who are, let's say, troubled with depression, anxiety, and trauma. What subset of them could we predict would have the most beneficial outcomes? And I kind of want to use latent inhibition, which is something we touched on earlier. What's up?
I would love to do that. I actually have a homegirl that went to college with me in Augusta that wants to open a practice for psychedelic therapy for people. And I told her like, bro, just tell me, just let me know. I'll come sit. I promise you, I'll be good. I'll come sit. I just want to help people integrate. Cause no, like there's a thing in the shamanic space of like understanding what a sitter is, understanding how to integrate, and understanding the diet that goes with this. Like when I first got into psychedelics, I didn't get into psychedelics the way most people did. I got into it one with your LB. That was my first experience. I don't know if you know that story yet. I'll tell you one day. Blame Keith. But that's the story for one day. We had a time over there with Pope and Shamari and all them one day. And so we had that experience. But my most my most well and deepest experience with psychedelics, I actually met a guy that does sessions. He does like professional. He does like all the seminars and stuff. And he sent me a printout, and it's like a pre-work sitting thing for shrooms. And it was like a diet. It was setting the space. It was the setting things. Like you're not supposed to eat within a certain amount of time of digesting them. How to set the room for it to give you the deepest experience. What things you could add to either slow down or increase the experience. And then I even had a sitter come sit with me. Somebody that was uh playing music and tones throughout the space. She made certain teas and stuff to make the experience easier for me to get through. So when I say there's a shamanic and a healing side to this, I'm not talking about psychedelics in the space of like go to your local drug dealer and get some shrooms and eat as many of them as you can. Like, no. Actually create a setting, actually create a ceremony for this. And it becomes an intentional practice that is very therapeutic. I would argue, bro, like I was in a pretty depressed state when I got into psychedelics, but it was able to, I don't want to say re-engineer my mind, but I call shrooms the medicine. You sit with medicine. Why? Because this medicine is smart enough to figure out it's an adaptogen. It's smart enough to figure out what's wrong with you and heal it if you get the fuck out the way. You see what I'm saying? And so I tell people like I'm extremely passionate about that. That's why I picked up even the title of starting to call myself a shaman because it's like, no, that's something I'm really into. If you think you want to figure out psychedelics, you're not sure how it's gonna work for you, I have a formula that I would love to try with somebody that if I just would trust me. It worked for me. Can't put I can't guarantee it work for the next person, but I can walk you through it. You feel me? And we can figure out what works and we can do the research. So when you get into that, let me know, dog. I'm serious. We'll work that out.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think next time I'd be interested in talking about shamanism and how their practices are or aren't associated with proper set and setting and the practice of, let's say, responsible psychedelic therapy that you were kind of alluding to there. I really like the idea of, there's so much in our culture today that's very instantaneous. Like I'm fat, I just want to take a pill that gets rid of it. If I want something right now, and I don't want to do the long term work that I would take to really, I guess, earn the benefits in some sense. And that can sound bad, but I think that's right. I think that there's a I think that there's a
You have to earn a good life.
mhm,
I think that's a
mhm, and
conversation I like to have a lot of times because people are always like, "Oh, well, I feel like the world should be like this." It's like if you had to get it out the mud, if it wasn't for the government and society, like, it'd be worse. So you could complain all you want to, but hey, shawty, if you ain't had no money and you had to go figure out how to eat, yeah, man, complain somewhere else. I mean, what are you talking about?
no, okay, okay, for real. That's real. And yeah, no, I need to read up more on shamanism as well. I need to get a better understanding of that because I think
And,
I mean, it's in some sense, it's a precursor. I don't. My history is not super accurate, but my limited understanding is that a lot of shamanism is a precursor to contemporary religious and spiritual
and
practices
medicine. They were
and
just
medicine.
they were
Yeah,
herbalists, they were botanists. They grew, they knew what plants did what combinations of plants put you in what state, and they understood how to give them to a person in a way that was healing. So these are the botanists, these are the herbalists, these are the alchemists of early civilization. These are the medicine men and women of early civilization. These are all shaman are. They're just people that are in touch enough with nature to know how to use it. That was my understanding. I know how like for me, I smoke weed, I do shrooms, I take herbs, I lavender, chamomile, dandelion. Nigga, I know what these things are. I know how they help the body. I spend a lot of time with teas. I'm very strong on herbal teas, understanding how different teas affect the body, how different herbs affect the body. It's not just about shrooms and psychedelics. It's about herbology in general and how to treat the body in a way mentally, physically, and spiritually. You know what I'm saying? Like, how do I serve the mind? How do I serve the body? And how do I serve the soul? And being familiar enough with that process to walk someone through it.
and okay, and then I also read that an important aspect of medicine men and its efficacy in a tribe was that the tribe thought it worked, and that
Yeah, you had to
the
believe it.
tribe believed in it, and also the shamans, the medicine men, they also conducted themselves a certain way, and so there
Hmm.
was I'm not trying to be flippant, if that's the right word. I'm not trying to downplay this, but there was a drama, there was a ritual, like there was an intention and a goal, a purpose that was there that helped shape what
The
the
story.
way that people the story. There was a story that helped people shape their attention and manifest certain experiences that perhaps, like we said before, dynamically started that loop of healing of experience, knowledge, wisdom, experience. With you you have an experience that you can turn into knowledge that you hopefully combine, and you embody that as wisdom that enforces or influences how you act moving forward, and how you act moving forward yields different experiences. And I
So
think that's, yeah, yeah.
it's important because you realize that a lot of people consider the shamanic path to be the path of the wounded healer. What does that mean? It means that you have to have healed yourself before you can heal someone else. So you have to have had the experience of healing and the experience of pain before you can walk somebody through both. And so when we really look at this, what am I saying? I'm saying that this shaman or the medicine men in most civilizations, and like you said, they're building up a story. There's a reality there that has to be put into place, you know? So what you're really saying is that this is go back to the hero journey and everything we're talking about, that this shaman's power came from the village's belief in the story that he was selling. You see what I'm saying? Like there's a belief, like it's even the same thing with medicine now. That's why they can give you a placebo pill, and if they tell you what kind of pill it is based off the system that you believe, have the funky rituals, the dance, the personality, and the confidence for you to believe it, and your body will react as such.
I don't know if I'd go that far, but here's what I would say. I would say that the placebo effect is crazy.
It's
And
crazy.
there's so
It has to be pointed at
there's
something. You see, like there's so much there.
right. Yeah, the placebo effect is extremely interesting, and we've established this before, but in our discussions, but you see the world through a story,
Hmm.
you know? And so the upper limit of how amazingly things can transform if you first find the optimal story and then work and sacrifice to embody that story, uh, who knows what the upper limit is.
You know,
So, yeah, yeah, yeah.
and so that's what we talk about potential. Potential is just like, all right, so technically, if you believe that you're something and you work hard enough to make that thing that you believe true, it's possible. Let's take it a level deeper. If we are fractions of the all and we have the all or source within us, or we're reflections of the all, then that means that we have everything that's in the reality as a part of our internal environment in some form or fashion. And our ability to tap into that or multiply that or confirm that is a different thing. So for me, why do I believe the placebo effect works? Because if I'm a reflection of the all and I know that and I believe that something's in me, and all I do is put something in me to signify that thing, my body and my mind will produce the actual effects of it because it has it there.
Look, that's a good enough explanation for me. I'm not gonna lie to you. I haven't read too much about it. They and there's different terms for it, right? Like what's the difference between the belief that this thing will heal you and your mindset about the thing? What's the difference between the belief and the mindset? And so there's this book, Mindset by Carol Dweck, that where she does do a lot of empirical work on, for example, taking hotel cleaners and taking half of them and explaining to them the story of what they're doing. They are executing a lot of aerobic exercise, essentially walking up and down stairs, bending over, they're working out. And so you tell half of them the story of working out and you don't tell the other half. And then you measure their physiological effects after some time, and the individuals that you told the story to, they actually they're healthier.
Reality is
Like
mental.
what? It's crazy, man. So it's there's a lot to be explored. Definitely.
That's
Definitely.
my curiosity with metaphysics is
Yeah.
how much does the mind reflect reality and how much does me believing this shit affect how it affects my life? That's why I started believing wild shit. Okay, well, let me just live in La La Land for however long I can. And if anything, if it breaks anything, I'll stop. But hey, a lot of stuff I've kept that I consider La La Land shit. That's not keeping me from being a human being, and it's actually making me a better person. So, yeah.
Right, right. And one maybe one potential danger there is essentially creating a false environment around you where things don't break, so everything is fine, but that's because you, for example, have immersed yourself in a social echo chamber where no one disagrees with you. Because things breaking socially might be evidence that what you're doing is wrong. It might be,
Hmm.
right? It might not be, but that's I like how you pointed out, you know, if there's no conflict essentially. If nothing breaks, then it seems like things are okay. And that's very much aligned with uh pragmatism, where you have these ideas and you throw them at experience through action. And as long as things work out fine, then it's true enough. It's a good enough explanation. It's a good enough idea. But that's part of my worry with academia and higher education right now. It's maybe something we can talk about in the next video is like I mentioned before, just how do we set up institutions of learning that give adequate conceptual knowledge that can be tested consistently against experience.
Yeah, and it's proof of value. I call it proof of work, bro. Like, if you have a good idea, if you like, for me, it's my biggest thing is for everything that I'm building with the Players Collective. I believe there's a better, more holistic, and more joyful way for us to do business. So my main goal is to figure out how to build a business that exemplifies that. I have ideas that work. I have ideas that don't work. I explain things to people that I think is fucking genius, and they look at me like I'm fucking retarded. So it's just a matter of figuring out what works and what doesn't work. Like you say, you got to be willing to just kind of throw the paper at the wall and see what sticks. And to me, that trial and error, I argue that that's why I'm a great engineer because I'm not afraid of breaking something as long as I don't kill nobody. Like I don't mind trying some shit as long as nobody don't get hurt. We get try. Anybody gonna die? You hurt a little bit? How much you hurt? Cause I want to know. Cause I might just say fuck it. What's the cost? You know what I'm saying? Like, cause I do believe that there is a cost. Like you do have to be willing to go through pain. You have to be willing to go through heartache to get a good marriage. You have to know you know what I'm saying? Like there is an aspect of this. You have to go through pain in the body to get stronger. Like there isn't you don't get the good experiences without the bad ones. You can't tiptoe around it and be like, well, I only want the good things, the good possibilities. Like, no, you gotta be open to all of it. And as long as you're open to all of it and you're willing to learn from all of it, you win. I believe that's the game of life. Like how much can I go through for me to figure out how to one, be mentally happy, and then figure out how to two, continue to go through shit so I can be better.
It's almost as if you have to fall in love with the process of suffering.
Literally. Life is suffering is one of Buddha's quotes for a reason. That's what I think that means is that there is an aspect of life, a growing and creative life that is suffering, that is painful. And you have to be okay with that because that's the price of growth. You know what I'm saying? Like that's the entry. You got to do that. You don't get some of it without the other. Like, you can't name a great person that ain't had a time where they were homeless or suffering in some way. It's a part of the struggle. You got to have it. Or you came in the game successful and powerful and you end it and you will have a period where you lose everything and have to get it back. It's a part of the game.
Makes
Our re-
sense.
our rejection of the bad parts is why we don't enjoy life. That shouldn't have happened. I didn't want to go there. Why did this have to happen? Or we blame the person that gave us the idea because we don't want to be accountable for our own actions, whatever it may be. A lot of times we're just avoiding the bad parts. And they're going to come.
Mhm.
You know? So we just have to figure out how to enjoy it and love this ride. I think life is about learning to love the journey. Once you love the journey, everything else is just whatever it is.
No, I agree. Dog, this is a good talk.
Definitely good talk. I'm gonna enjoy breaking this one down. I feel like we got some good clips and we got some good points for some other ideas and conversation we can have. Dog, it's always a good time though, man.
Always good, man. Appreciate you. I'll catch you later.
Definitely, dog. Same to you.